Hi, everybody. Welcome to Freedom Files. I'm Ed Cox. I represent inmates before the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles and fight for their freedom. In Freedom Files, we interview people who have served time in prison, been released, reintegrated into society, and live lives of purpose and meaning. Today, we're going to talk to Taylor McShan. Taylor is a fine young man, and he had several life events early in his life that led to his incarceration. But I think you'll really enjoy hearing what he experienced and what he learned through this process. And I hope you enjoy the show. Well, good morning, Taylor.
Morning, Mr. Cox. How are you doing?
Good. And as we get started, you're welcome to call me whatever you like. Most people call me Ed. So if you're comfortable with that, we'll do that. Okay. I was looking back through my notes, and I have down that we met on Thursday, March 13th, 2019 at 11:30 in the morning on the Ellis unit in Huntsville.
Yes, sir.
And I remember that meeting, and we talked about a lot, and I wanted to ask you if you ever saw yourself winding up at a place like the Ellis unit.
Growing up, definitely went through life never having anybody in my family that I knew of going to prison. It wasn't ever really a thought, especially in my childhood. I grew up playing baseball. That was my life, going to school, hanging with friends, and then even going to college for baseball, and even being out on my own then. It just was really never a thought. It wasn't something. I never felt like I was a person that would be getting in trouble, or not to say that I was above getting in trouble, but I just really never saw that as a possibility. It wasn't ever even in my mind. So I definitely never thought about ending up at, Ellis unit, having an interview with you.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cedar Park, north of Austin. I was born in Katy, which is outside of Houston, West Houston. And I lived in Katy for a couple of years, on and off, with my mom. At the time, that's where my dad lived. So, and then by the time I was close to 4, I would say we were full-time, just me and her in Cedar Park. And that's where I grew up until I graduated high school.
And so you talked about playing baseball. Tell me about when you got started in that, and what position you played, and how you got into college ball.
It started pretty early from what my mom told me. I was always trying to throw things in the house. I guess she saw that I had pretty good hand-eye coordination at an early age. Her story is that she went to Walmart and bought me like some wiffle balls and like tennis balls and those little like plastic red bats. And she said she used to take me to the park probably right around turning 4, and would just kind of pitch the little balls to me. And she said I'd swing away at them. And by then, as soon as I could get into t-ball, I started playing, and it was just, I don't remember my childhood not playing baseball. It got to where when I could, and whenever, my family could afford to do it, I started playing select baseball and on traveling teams. And by the time I was probably 12 or 13, I was traveling and playing baseball, and I just got well enough to where I was able to be on some of those teams, and went to a couple of national tournaments, a couple of state tournaments, and did really well. Played on an 18 and under team when I was 14, and by the time I got to high school, I played varsity all 4 years, and I mostly was like a middle infielder, second base, shortstop, third. But by the time, and I had always pitched, and that was what I loved. And by the time, I guess, my junior year, I pretty much was pitching full time. And that's what ended up getting me not really scouted a whole lot. I had to do a lot of my own self-promotion as far as getting looked at by colleges. But I did well enough to where I went to a few showcase tournaments and tryouts to where I had a couple of teams that wanted me to come play. And I ended up picking Howard Payne University, a Division III school in Brownwood. The pitching coach there was he blew me away. His name's Jerry Don Gleaton. He's a former All-American at UT and played in the majors for 16 years or something like that. And of all the mentors you could have for a pitching coach, it was like, how do you turn that down? So that's what I ended up doing. It was a big part of my life for sure.
So what was great about Jerry Don as a mentor when you got to Howard Payne?
Well, that was his hometown. That's where he grew up, and it meant a lot to him to be there. I mean, he could have probably been coaching at anywhere he wanted, just from his knowledge and just the type of person he was. And Howard Payne's also a Christian university, and it just seemed like he was just a sincere and just good person. Like, I felt like he genuinely cared about making us better ball players and better men. And the head coach there, Steve Lynn, he was the exact same way. And it felt right. I mean, and I got a partial academic scholarship because Division III doesn't offer athletic scholarships. So it was just a really good opportunity, I felt like, and went to the campus and just felt like, that it was right. So I really enjoyed it.
How much of your time as a student at Howard Payne was taken up by baseball?
Well, I wish I could say that it was just so much, but it wasn't. I mean, I got to do all my classes in the morning, and then afternoons, even in the off season, we were at practice, and I worked that whole time too. I worked at a little place called Humphrey Pete's. It's like a steakhouse and bar, and so I waited tables, and I kind of had to pay my way through a little bit as well. But it really wasn't just like, I didn't ever feel like it took up all my time. I still had free time, and I still had, time to go to class. And so it was a good balance. I felt like being a student athlete. It wasn't overwhelming. So,
how would you describe yourself growing up as a kid and going into college? What kind of person were you?
Well, going into it, all I ever thought about was baseball in school, and that was all I really knew. My mom was just my biggest fan, and it was always about, well, what do we need to do next, and what's your plan? And she kept me very grounded. She always had my best intentions for me. So even when I was around, that age where you're starting to want to explore and kind of go out a little more, and, hey, Mom, I kind of want to go over to my buddy's house, knowing you're probably not going to go to your buddy's house. She saw through a lot of that. So she really, I wouldn't say she was overbearing. I just think she was very smart and tried her best to kind of keep me grounded. So all through high school, I never wanted to disappoint her, and had such a hard time lying to her that I really didn't do a whole lot other than baseball, So it was, I was a good kid. I stayed out of trouble. I was kind of a class clown at times, liked a little too much attention. Had to get told to be quiet a few times, maybe sat in the hallways a few times, but nothing ever extreme. Probably what most people would say, ordinary boys being boys kind of, uh, mentality, just enjoying attention sometimes a little too much.
Now, you and your mother were a pair. In other words, that was your whole family unit, right?
Right. Her parents lived about 2 blocks from me. And so, yes, our household was just me and my mom, but her parents were a huge part of my life. They were always there. There were times where I would literally just get on my bike and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to Nanny and Papoose." And she'd be like, "All right," and it was just like a family atmosphere just as much there as it was home. It was like my second home. And it was a good little escape at times, if I couldn't, go hang out with one of the neighborhood kids that I grew up with, it was always going there. So, and they were a huge, huge support system for me. My grandfather was really like a father figure, and my grandmother was always like that mediator for me. Like if I would get in trouble, which never really did, but if I just needed someone else other than my mom to be that nurturer, or, it was like she was always there. And I grew up playing golf with her, and that was one thing we really connected on. And my grandfather was a huge Atlanta Braves fan, so we always were watching the Braves games, so we always connected on baseball, and it was like an extended family, it really was. So
that's terrific. Well, as you worked your way through Howard Payne, what did you end up transitioning to coming out of school?
Well, when I got to Howard Payne my freshman year, I was really gung-ho, just like, oh my gosh, I'm getting to do this. This is like a dream come true. Very focused, very just ready to do whatever I needed to do. And, like within a couple of months, I started seeing that, wow, I have all this freedom. I was living in the dorm. There are girls everywhere. There's like fraternities, sororities. There's always something going on. And it was just like, for me, it was all of a sudden having all this freedom, and I went from, at the beginning, I was like, well, my mom really wouldn't want me to go over to that house because there's probably going to be a lot of drinking, and, it's not a good idea. I should stay home. And then after a few months, it was more like, well, how is she going to know? Like, I'm responsible. I can do that and not, go outside of what I know I shouldn't. And, it slowly got to being, well, okay, well, I can go do that and stay out till 1 or 2 in the morning. And then all of a sudden I'm missing a 7 a.m. class here and coming in late to the next class. And, it really was just a slow progression for me that first year at school. And I managed to make it through the first year, but my grades ended up suffering. I wasn't studying like I should. I was doing the bare minimum. I was missing quite a few classes, just in general. I was drinking. I was definitely focusing on things that weren't priorities, as far as just trying to fit in and be accepted. And, it was just all these things all of a sudden I never did in high school. And now all of a sudden I get to do whatever I want. And looking back on it, I know I took advantage of that in a negative way. And it ended up really hurting me as far as my education. And I ended up leaving after 1 year. And I could have come back for my sophomore year, but there were some things, especially for my mom and within my family, that came up too, that I was put in a really hard situation. It was my grandfather had passed away when I was a sophomore in high school, and my mom's dad. And my grandmother was left by herself, and we were really having to help support her. And I had found out a lot of things about the family dynamic that I never knew, as far as finances and stuff. Not ever knowing that my mom struggled as much as she did, and that her parents helped out a lot. And my mom's sisters had all found out and took it very... I still, to this day, don't know how they took it, but it wasn't good. They pretty much gave my grandmother an ultimatum, and my mom ended up pretty much losing the house we grew up in. They had to sell it, and she had to get an apartment on her own and was struggling. And so it was, well, as bad as I'm doing in school, I could go back for a second year and bite the bullet and just do it and get my grades back up and still be able to play and do all these things, or I could come home and help my mom pay the bills. And so I took the easy way out. For me, it was hard to see my mom struggle, and I knew it would be harder to see her struggle from far away. I knew if I stayed in school, things were progressing, and I didn't know how to make it stop as far as a negative thing, the drinking and not really focusing on priorities. So I moved back from college after 1 year and lived with my mom in her apartment with her and helped pay the bills and started working. And so that's kind of how all of that turned out for me.
And so you're what, 19 at that time?
Yes, sir.
And so moving back in with your mom at 19, what did you start doing for work?
I immediately started, I had a few little just odd jobs. I worked at Ashley Furniture Store in the warehouse in Pflugerville. A buddy of mine that I'm still good friends with to this day helped me get a job there. I ended up taking a job welding and sandblasting for a company. A buddy of mine from high school's family owned it. And I had welded in high school in the ag shop and really loved it. My cousin out in Sealy, that's what he's done his whole life and what he went to school for. And so I'd always kind of had that as like a trade or like a hobby at the time. But as soon as I took that first job with that welding and sandblasting company, I was just like, wow, this is really cool. Like I'm making, at the time, not great money, but for a 19-year-old with minimal bills, it was good enough, and I really liked it. And I did that for quite a while, maybe not even a full year. And then my cousin called me and was like, hey, if you're really thinking about welding, there's a company out here that's hiring right now that I'm sure you could pass the test, and they are working a lot of hours, and the pay is probably better than anything you'd get out in Austin. You should really think about it. And so I called my grandmother, which is my dad's mom. And I was just like, hey, well, what if I get this job? What happens? And she was like, well, you can move down here. And it just had never been an option. That grandmother had always been a huge supporter, both grandparents. That grandfather passed away when I was really young, probably about, probably 8 or 9, I want to say. And I'm probably wrong, but I was really young. And she and my dad had always been supporters of me. It's just they were always far away. And I think there was a dynamic between my mom and my dad that I never understood, and I still don't. But it's one of those things I don't need to know, But she was just 100% supporting me about it. She was like, you know what, if you get the job, we'll make it work. Like, we'll help you. And I'm like, wow, okay. So
How did your mom handle the news of you taking a job someplace else?
She took it really hard. She felt like I was trying to get away from her. And from what I know now, later in life, it's she's always had somebody there, and I don't know if being alone has ever been easy for her. And so me taking that job, I think she really felt like I was abandoning her. And I remember always just having to tell her, I'm just trying to better myself. You know, if I don't better myself, I can't help you. I can't help myself. And she, I think, understood, but I don't think she ever really liked it. She never really was 100% on board. It was still always that feeling of, you know, leaving her or something. But that's what I ended up doing. I took that job. I passed my test, took the job, moved in with my cousin, and started working.
And where was that?
That was in Sealy. The company was in Sealy as well, called BAE Systems. They built like military all-terrain vehicles. It was pretty neat. Really good job. I stayed there for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months until I was laid off. That was back when Obama was in office, and just a lot of things happened as far as politics, and a lot of layoffs had ended up happening. So because I was one of the newer guys, it's just, you know, that's kind of part of the industry that I've learned now.
Yeah. What was it like moving in with your cousin?
It was kind of like a whole new world for me. I didn't know what to expect. I had only got to see him sporadically growing up just because of the dynamic between my mom and dad. It's not like I was seeing him every other weekend or something. It was, you know, maybe once a year here and there. You know, he's 10 years older than me. So back when he was in his 20s, you know, I'm this young kid probably coming around the house. And I mean, I can only imagine for him, you know, it's like, who is this kid? Like, I never felt like he was negative towards me or like he ever didn't accept me. Nothing like that. But it was definitely, I just try to see it from his perspective, like, okay, well, this is my, you know, it's my uncle's, you know, son. Like, here he is. You know, I'll probably see him next year or something. And to go from that to all of a sudden, oh, wow, now he's 19 and he's living with me and I'm, you know, in my late 20s, early 30s. And what is this going to be like? And he already had one roommate, a friend of his from high school. So it was kind of like, and they were about the same age. So here I was, this kid, coming into a house with, you know, adult men who had like really good jobs and had, you know, from what I thought, really had things going for themselves, and completely different environment. Cedar Park to Sealy, it's like going from, you know, the Austinites to going out to the country. And I had always kind of related to being country, but I never really was country because I just didn't grow up out there with them. You know, had I grown up with my dad, I'd probably be a little bit different. But I really liked it. I mean, I loved living there. I made a lot of good friends. Me and my cousin were really close. You know, we'd hang out all the time. So it wasn't what I expected, but it in a good way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So socially, you talk about making a lot of friends. What did you find yourself doing with your free time with your friends?
Well, that first job at BAE, I was working nights. So I worked 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I mean, I really didn't do anything during that time because I was working 6 days a week most of the time. I was pretty much getting all the hours I could possibly handle. I mean, I was seeing these paychecks that I was just like, this seems fake. Like, how am I making this much money? And I didn't have any time to do anything with it. So, back then, that's what, 2009, 2010. It's like, well, that was 2009. So that was kind of before Amazon was huge like it is now. So, but even then I was, oh, okay, I think I'll just buy this digital camera. Or, I was just didn't know what else to do with my time. And once I left that job, I was able to kind of start going out a little more and meeting people. And mostly at first it was just meeting a lot of people through my cousin. And so socially, I think I was kind of right where I left off as far as college. I drank, but at that time it wasn't anything excessive yet. It was just kind of like socially something to do. Like if my cousin was like, "Hey, we're going to go to the county fair. So and so is going to be playing tonight. It'll be really fun." I'm like, "Okay." Well, while I'm there, you're at these fairs and he's introducing me to people, and everybody's having a beer, dancing, everything. So that was kind of just like, oh, okay, this is normal. Like, that's fine. And so that's kind of what my social life was like for a while.
So I want to turn to the Hansens, and when did you come to know the Hansens, and when did you begin dating Valerie?
Okay. In late 2009, right in December, I remember, me and my cousin got to go to Las Vegas for the National Finals Rodeo. And it was kind of like my grandmother on my dad's side helped, me to be able to go. And I'd saved up some money to go. And so we went on this trip, and it was supposed to be like for my 21st birthday. And, me and my cousin were really close at the time. So, we're like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this. He'd been several times, and it was kind of like a family thing to go to Vegas for the finals rodeo. And so, yeah, we went. But around that time, I had reconnected with Valerie on Facebook, and me and her had known each other. I first met her probably around middle school. She was dating one of my friends that was on a select baseball team with me. Her and Wayne were like inseparable. Like Valerie would come to the baseball games. He'd say, "Hey, you want to come out and hang out?" And I'd be like, "Sure." And I'd go over there, and Valerie was there, like she was like, they were like inseparable back then. And that was when we were young, probably around, I don't know, 14, 15. And way before I started dating, I know. But so I knew her. I knew she was a great person. Always was attracted to her. And then I don't remember when exactly it happened, but I saw Valerie while she was pregnant with, I want to say, her second daughter when I was in Cedar Park. I think it was during the time I was still at Howard Payne. I had come home for a weekend and went to kind of like a little party with a buddy of mine from high school. And his girlfriend and Valerie were good friends. And so I saw her and I was just like, "Oh, wow, like, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in years." Like, and we kind of reconnected, talked a little bit, but didn't think much of it. And then I wish I could tell you exactly who reached out to who, but I definitely remember messaging her and was just like, "Wow, how have you been?" And it just kind of slowly started from there. And then by January, I remember driving down there for the first time. And well, the first time we actually got to like see each other, she came to Sealy and stayed the night, and we just got to hang out and go out to eat and just kind of catch up and almost give our life stories leading up to where we're at now. And it was really good, and it got to be pretty serious. And the first time I met the Hansens, she had asked me if I wanted to come down for the weekend. And I was like, well, sure. Like, I understand you have two little girls, and it's not easy for you to have somebody watch them, or just maybe it's not comfortable for you to bring your two daughters to my house, to a guy that, yes, you know me, but maybe just started seeing, and I understand all that. So, yeah, I drove down there, and I will never forget just pulling up, seeing Valerie's oldest daughter, and I want to say two of her sisters were walking down the road leading up to their house. And they gave me such a hard time because I know for a fact I was going slow, and I tried to avoid them as far over to the left as I could, and I did. But of course, they came in the house telling Valerie, I wasn't there 5 minutes, like, I don't know who that was, but he tried to hit us. And I'm like, I'm right here. Like, I definitely did not. And they were just trying to be funny, and I was just like, oh gosh. And the way Evelyn greeted me, and just like, well, just welcome, boy. I'm glad you're here. I'm so happy to meet you. And just like, it was just like a huge family. Like, there's so many people in this house. I grew up just me and my mom, and now it's Evelyn, Henry, Valerie, her two daughters, Miranda, Natalia, and Andrea was over there. Then plus, any of them could have any amount of friends over at any time. And it was just always like, it just felt like this big family all the time. Like, it was never a dull moment. And just how it worked out from January onward, it was just, okay, well, I knew it was easier for me to go there. So it was like I would work during the week and go see her on the weekend.
And how far was Valerie away from you?
It was right at an hour and a half. I mean, it wasn't too bad. I would just hit I-10 all the way to the Buc-ee's in Luling, and I was pretty much there. So it was just a straight shot, super easy drive. Even with my little F-150 that was a standard without cruise control, it wasn't bad at all. You do a lot of things that maybe don't seem normal whenever you really care, and I definitely cared.
So Evelyn and Henry are Valerie's parents, right?
They are basically her adopted parents.
Okay.
Valerie's biological mom is not Evelyn, and Valerie's biological dad is Evelyn's ex-husband, which is not Henry. Evelyn is probably has one of the biggest hearts I've ever been around. She'll take you in, and she doesn't care about your past, those kinds of things.
Did you sense that immediately the first time you met her? How was that different? You talk about this big family numbers wise, but just relationally, how was it to what did you experience in that house?
It was just constant laughter, joy, always feeling accepted, never a dull moment, plenty of laughs and jokes. And I mean, sometimes it was just chaos, but it was like controlled and happy chaos. It was always just good. Like, you just always felt welcomed. And I mean, that family just doesn't know how to turn people away. And I mean, I can say it's such a blessing. But I feel bad for them sometimes because they do have such a hard time. There's been situations where I'll have to tell Evelyn, sometimes it's okay to say no. There's some people that aren't wanting your help, or it would actually hurt you if you do try to help, or, but she's just got a huge heart, and so does Henry. And her daughters were, that's how they were raised, and they're the exact same way.
You live with them, right? You live with Henry right now, correct?
Yes, sir. He actually just left not too long ago. He's going to Luling, to their property. He likes to go out to his ranch. They have quite a bit of land out there, and they're working on getting fully moved out there because Evelyn just took a job in Schulenburg, which isn't too terribly far from there. And he's currently working for the census, and his job will be up pretty soon. And so, yeah, when he gets a chance, he likes to go out there. And even though he's getting a little older and, feet swell up a little bit and work isn't as easy like it used to be, he still likes to get out there and do what he can. And he just enjoys his time out there. So he headed out there this morning. But, yeah, it's been me and Henry since I got here. Evelyn has been a administrator for nursing homes and has been doing a lot of interim jobs. So she might be in El Paso for a month or two, and then she was recently in McAllen, which is in the Valley in South Texas, and now she finally took a full-time job, and she's going to get to settle down. And it was an offer she just couldn't refuse. So I'm really happy for her and for Henry to be able to feel more grounded now and kind of get to settle in and figure out, the next chapter for their life,
That's terrific. I want to talk about what happened was it September of 2010 with Valerie?
Right.
And where were the two of you all at that time in your relationship?
Things had been going really well for probably a month leading up to that. She was finalizing her divorce, and it was just, for her, it was really difficult just being a single mom, having to rely on Evelyn and Henry so much, and to not be this as independent of a woman as she'd like to be. She was going to Paul Mitchell Cosmetology School, and so she was putting herself through that, and it was just a really difficult time for her. We were so young, and here I was, this guy that was trying to fit myself in all that somehow. And she never made me feel like I was too much, but I definitely know that it was just hard for her to try to balance all of that. And that I think she just had moments where it was just difficult, and she didn't know how to process all of it and how to deal with it. And so we were still seeing each other. But yeah, it was just a hard time. But it's like, I knew we both knew it was going to work. And, we had talked about the future and talked about things that, were going to happen. It was just a rough time at the moment. And I was still working. And I knew it was going to work out. So we were fine. It was just kind of one of those things where I think she was just having a hard time. And I don't think it really necessarily had anything to do with me.
Yeah. And so how did you find yourself in a committed relationship all of the sudden when it doesn't sound like that was your focus before reconnecting with Valerie?
Right. It really wasn't. It wasn't my plan by any means. At that time in my life, I had no plan. It was just work. And I don't know, maybe it was because I was such a social person now, because I liked going out. I liked having beers with friends. I liked dancing with girls at the honky tonks and doing all that. I was really enjoying living that kind of like out in the country and young single life. And I liked it. And then, I started talking with Valerie, and next thing I know, I'm, holding their daughters and, making sure like, okay, yeah, I'll watch a cartoon with them while you go do what you need to do and go run your errands. And I'm there every weekend, and I'm like, when did that happen? But I really embraced it. It like felt right. Growing up, I'd always known that my biggest goal in life was just to be a good dad and to be a good husband. And so it was just like, I felt that I had that with her from probably sooner than most people feel it. And it wasn't expected. And I think that's kind of how God works, is that he gives you exactly what you need when you're not looking for it. And so, it was just like, well, here I am. I guess this is what we're doing, and I just went with it. I didn't try to overthink it. And I really, really enjoyed our time together.
So you go from working hard, socializing, dancing in honky tonks to reconnecting with Valerie, and going from no plan, no thinking about the future, to holding her girls, talking to her specifically about plans for your life together. Right. I mean, that's a big transition.
Very big. Definitely very big.
And so you're going along, and what happened to Valerie in September of 2010?
I remember being at work, and it was on the 17th. It was almost a week after my birthday, and her youngest daughter's birthday party was that weekend. And I just remember my phone going off in my pocket, and it just kept going off, and I'm in the middle of welding, and I'm not thinking much of it, and it just keeps going off, and I'm just like, okay. Like, I finally get into my phone. I see that Valerie's sister, Andrea, which was her like mini-me, they have the same biological mom, so they look a lot alike. And I had a bunch of missed calls, and I finally stepped outside to call her, and it's like as soon as she answered, I knew what it was. She had told me that Valerie had a car wreck on her way to drop the girls off, and that she was gone. I remember that's what she said. And
I am so sorry about that.
Yeah, it was, obviously, it's still hard some days. It's never been easy for me. And I'm sure it's the same with her family, but you have to, it'll be 10 years in 12 days will be 10 years. And it's always going to be a part of my life. Uh, I mean, obviously, I'm still here with her family, but at the time, I didn't know what to do.
I lost my father when I was 5, and it was very sudden. And I just remember, well, I don't remember much because I was 5 years old, first of all, but I just remember being in a state of disbelief for a long time. And then, like, I had come home from kindergarten, and my mom told me that something similar to what Andrea told you. My mom told me my dad was gone and wasn't coming back, and I didn't get it. And I just remember laying on my bed and crying so long, and not, and at the time, looking back on it, I was thankful I was 5, because I felt like I was really experiencing my emotions and not holding anything in and trying to do anything other than being a 5-year-old who just figured out that my dad was gone. And I tell you what, I just think losing people we love is one of the most difficult things that can happen in our lives.
Yeah, it was, I mean, at the time, my cousin was actually working at that same shop with me. He was working nights over in the pipe department, and I was welding pressure vessels. And I mean, I just told Andrew I'd be there. And I hung up the phone and went straight to him, and I told him. And I remember I told him, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to go. And he was like, okay, well, I had rode with somebody, and so he told me he'd get a ride home. I could take his truck home so I could get to my truck and pack my things. And so, yeah, I got home, and we had another roommate at the time that I'd become really close with, Charlie. And so he was at the house. He worked from home at the time. And, I think I lost it. And because I was numb the whole way home, and then it really hit. And he was there, I had to have a few drinks and started packing my things. And I remember just going to Luling, and I had to call HR and tell them I didn't know when I'd be back, and that I just knew I needed to be there. And they were really understanding. And I want to say I spent a couple weeks there, and was a pallbearer, and just, it was a time where me and Valer's family we just got to be there. We didn't do a whole lot. A lot of nights, just me and all the sisters just laying in bed, just, here we are. Like, this is what we're doing. And, I was drinking a lot. And it just was, I didn't know what else to do, how else to cope. I did the best I could, which, I mean, did I do a good job? No. But, we do all we know how to do when we're in those situations. So I learned a lot from that, though, as far as how to handle things. And I think the fact that I wasn't sober kind of hindered me in how I could have done things better. But you learn from that whenever you quit drinking and quit doing those things. but I try to numb everything out was my biggest issue. But
absolutely. Yeah. So how did that time together affect your relationship with the Hansen family?
It just brought us closer. Evelyn I remember her telling me that she was like, I lost my daughter. She told me she wasn't going to lose her son.
Well, her commitment to you really kind of came through and became very evident a year and a half later, right?
Yeah.
And as we're talking, what is striking me is all the turns in your life that weren't on any plan that you encountered and you've dealt with, and that have you being the man you are today.
Right.
They're just a part of your life experience.
Definitely.
And so in January of 2012, you're out with a friend, not unlike other times, right?
Right.
And so can you tell me what happened? Like when you went out, was it any different from going out any other time?
No, definitely not. It was just started. My friend and I and his girlfriend were at my house. I was living in my own place by then. I had leased a little house out on some land outside of Sealy. And, him and his girlfriend come over. I remember making spaghetti for us and just hanging out. And she ended up having to go home. And so it just left me and my buddy. And I was just like, well, what are we going to do? Say, well, let's go out. Okay. Like, it wasn't, anything abnormal for us at the time. After Valerie's passing, I drank a lot. Not just socially, being honest with myself. I drank all the time, every day. Sometimes worse, sometimes not so bad. But so yeah, it was just like, yeah, let's go out. Okay. So went to a few places, and then it was nothing abnormal for us. We felt like it was just another night out.
And so as you get to the end of the night out and you guys are deciding to leave, who had driven that night?
I want to say Cody drove us that night. My buddy drove that night. It was in his truck. And so he had his keys to his truck. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but you ended up driving.
Yes.
And so you're leaving, and are you heading to your place, or where are you going?
Yeah, I was trying to go back to my house. He worked nights at the time, so he was, he could wake up on my couch with me at work, and it's not an issue. That was one of my closest friends at the time, so it was just, okay, I just got to get us back to my house so I can get up and try to go to work in the morning, and um, so that's all I was thinking about doing, was getting back to my place.
Yeah. And so, where were you when you had your accident?
The last thing I remember was seeing the Peach Ridge Road sign, which is in Brookshire. So it's like right across from where there's these polo grounds. There's a big polo ranch in Brookshire. And so that's what I remembered. That was the last thing I remember really knowing.
And what happened?
I remember we were trying to play really loud music. I know I was, because I was tired. I worked a lot of hours. I was working 10 or 12 hours at the time of day, and 5 to 6 days a week. We didn't leave till after 1:00, and so it was late. Tired, drank way too much, and I just really don't remember what happened. It wasn't like a conscious decision that I remembered. I just know that I woke up to impact. It was like that's what woke me up. I don't remember falling asleep. I've never fallen asleep behind the wheel. I've never blacked out. Just had never experienced that. So I really don't, to this day, I don't know what happened. What decision did I make that night that's what was the defining moment? I've always wondered that, but I never see anything in that story. Like, what happened? It's just not there.
So when you make impact, what did you make impact with?
There was a car on the inside left shoulder on I-10 that was parked, and I pretty much hit it directly from the back, going really fast. And I remember at that point, my buddy was just screaming, he was just upset. Didn't know what happened. Why did it happen? I guess he was asleep too. And we both were just like, oh my gosh, wow, how are we? I remember thinking, what even happened? And the truck, for me, everything was pushed back up against me. I had to basically crawl myself out because my legs were touching the dash, kind of pinned in a little bit. And we're up against the concrete barrier on the left, and just remember, I did something really bad. This is not good. What happened? Trying to piece everything together and trying to figure it out. And seeing this car when I get out, it had actually caught fire, and just not really knowing what was going on, just being so confused and just scared. And I guess there were just so many moments where I didn't understand what was going on. And then I just remember the moment whenever a police officer had asked me who was driving, and I told him I was, and he told me, to put my hands behind my back. And I was just it was at that moment where it was just I couldn't believe it. And I was hearing what people were saying, and I just didn't understand. It was it didn't feel real. I was how could this have happened? Why did it happen? Why did it have to be them? it wasn't even a thought about me. It was like, why did that have to happen to them because of me? You know, it was like, how is that fair? How am I walking and they're not, you know?
Yeah.
They didn't mean for that to happen.
So when you put your hands behind your back, where were you taken then?
They first took me to a hospital in Katy to get me checked out. I had a pretty bad cut in my left hand. It was bleeding pretty good, and so they took me to a hospital. I remember it was just one officer driving me, and they checked my hand. They drew my blood, and honestly, like, I picked glass out of my hand for several weeks. So I don't blame them for that, though. I know what it would feel like for maybe a mother to have to take care of some guy that shows up drunk after doing what I did. You know, I'm not saying she was negligent of her job. I just know that people feel with emotion, and I don't blame her at all. But so I wasn't at the hospital very long. But
where did they take you once you were checked out at the hospital?
To Waller County Jail in Hempstead.
And what do you remember about being put in jail?
I remember just being so mad at myself. Just, I've never known that kind of like disappointment in myself. I was disgusted. Like, I wasn't even scared of being there. It, like, all I could think about was just like, how did I let this happen? Like, how was I so irresponsible? Why? Like, and of course, you know, with all the alcohol I drank, it was just fueling all my emotions, and it was like I was trying to do my best to numb myself and just be like, you know what, you just need to relax and process, and like, you are in jail, like, you're about to be gone probably for a long time. Like, you need to kind of just breathe. And I couldn't. It was just nonstop in my head, just how, why, you know. And yeah, they processed me, and I remember I didn't even I got put in a tank that I didn't even have an open bed. So I threw this little mattress under the TV and laid down, and immediately just tried to shut everything out and went to sleep.
And that must have been early in the morning by that time, right?
Yeah, it was probably 4 or 5 in the morning by then.
And so who is the first person that you saw outside of law enforcement while you were in jail?
I want to say it was Phil.
And who's Phil?
Phil Baker. That was my lawyer, my attorney.
And isn't it a small world thing that we had no idea that I knew Phil Baker?
Right.
Yeah. So tell me about meeting Phil Baker for the first time.
I had no idea what to expect. Everything was still really hard for me as far as just processing what I did. It was just like, I was still in shock with myself. I was very upset with myself. And this guy walks in and sits down, and he's very serious looking. You could tell he was going to do his job, which I didn't even know what his job was at the time. I was like, why do I need a lawyer? I know what I did. Like, what is there to fight? You know, like, we're not fighting anything. I did what I did. So I'm not going to plead not guilty into something I know I did. And that's my thought. And he was just trying to explain to me that his job was to try to make sure I didn't have to do the maximum amount of time, and that he needed to get me out on bond. He said that, you know, that was our best chance, was if he could get me out rather than me have to try to fight it from in there. And I know the biggest thing he told me was that he just looked me straight in the eyes and told me, he was like, do you know that you've had your last drink? And
how did that hit you?
It was like, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I was just looking at him like, you didn't have to tell me that. I already knew that. And but it really drove like the nail home for me. It was just like, he's right. Like, if I ever want to have any chance at living life, I can't drink again. Like, I didn't want to drink again. I didn't want to. I mean, how could I ever drink again? Like, the last time I drank, what happened? Like, that would always be, into this day, that's my thought. Like, if anybody ever asks me, like coworkers or friends, like, you don't drink anymore? And I'm like, would you? Or, you know, why would I want to? Or I have no desire for it. And it's, but what Phil told me, it was just like, wow, I already felt it, but he's so right. You know, that was it. I mean, the fact that I'm even walking right now, that I'm alive, I'm breathing, like, if that's not a big enough gift, then who would I be to pick up another drink again? Like, what would that say about me? That everything was in vain, that it was for nothing? Like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. So, one of the letters I have is from a guy named Ron J. Wilson. Who is Ron J. Wilson?
Well, after I did 2 months in county and was able to bond out, I moved in with the Hansens. They were living in Luling. And I was on house arrest, and I had an ankle monitor on, and I had a curfew, and there were only certain things I could leave the house for. And Phil really helped push for me to be able to leave the house to go to AA meetings. And, you know, my aunt has now over 30 years of sobriety through NA, and she is a big supporter of that for me. And it was just like, you know, I knew that's what I was going to try. And I walked into the little Luling AA group, and this kind of California slick back hair with tattoos guys sitting down, and you know, I'm kind of feeling everybody out and wondering what this is all about. And I hear him start speaking, and I'm just like, I did not expect that. And everything he said was so, it just felt like he was saying everything to me. Like, I was like, how does every word out of your mouth pertain to me in some way, shape, or form? Like, how am I relating to your story when we are probably night and day different? And that's kind of how that worked for me with the program. It was just like, no matter who was talking, you could see some kind of thing that resonated in you. Like, oh, wow, like, I remember that. Or yeah, that's how I felt. Or, oh, wow, I went through that too. Or, and so Ron and I immediately hit it off. And I ended up asking him about, sponsorship and working the steps. And I mean, to this day, we're still in contact, even though he ended up moving back to California, but he's a very successful businessman. And, we talk on the phone, and we've kept a connection all these years. And he's the one that helped me work the steps. And
Well, and in his letter, he said, as most newcomers are, Taylor was quiet the first night I met him. However, he did show common manners and a level of interest in the program that I don't see very often with first timers. So he said you asked him some questions at the second meeting about the program. And then he said something. He said, as is common in our fellowship, I was eager to assist him and introduce him to the protocol of our meeting. So what is this fellowship that he's talking about?
well, a lot of what he speaks of about the program is kind of what I refer to as like the program lingo, if you will. If you walk into a baseball locker room, the guys are talking a certain way. They have their own jargon. It's very similar to AA. There is a AA language, so to speak, and he is very fluent in it. So he refers to the program that way. And but he's right. I mean, there are certain ways that meetings are held. There are certain ways to share inside a meeting and to talk about certain things. So when you're a newcomer, you don't know any of that, and you're just there. Most of the time, you're still shaking from not drinking or something. And I had a couple of months sober already, so I was clean. I was dried up, as they say, and so yeah, I wanted to know how it all worked, and I was just like, I feel like I relate to you, like that you and I would work well. And being a small meeting like it was in Luling, Texas, that was the person who I was just like, yep, okay, I know how this is supposed to work. I'm supposed to find a sponsor, and then they're supposed to hold my hand through all this and go over the program and go over the steps and teach me all this stuff. And that is how it works. And I asked Ron to be that for me, and he gladly accepted it. And we spent many a night on his porch with a spiral notebook in my hand and a highlighter, and going through the AA book together, and just telling each other stories, our experiences, what we were like then and what we were like now, and how we got there. And it really is a fellowship. It is not quite the same as what you would think on Sunday mornings, but because AA is not a religious program, but it is definitely a fellowship nonetheless. It's a group of people who commonly wouldn't be together. They can come together and relate and almost become family. And Ron was definitely, and still is, a big brother to me. Yeah.
And so, you said a moment ago at that first meeting how you're listening and you're feeling like Ron is speaking directly to you, and he looks different from you, and you are surprised at how the things that he's saying are resonating so deeply with you. Did you find that you had that kind of relationship and resonance through the program with others?
Definitely. I mean, I've been to meetings in Austin, Luling, San Marcos, New Braunfels, and even now in Marble Falls, Kingsland. Uh, the program is the same. It doesn't change. To reference it for other people, it might be like, okay, well, the Bible hasn't changed. New editions of the AA book come out, but it's still the same literature. So the program, if somebody has 50 years of sobriety, or if they have 5 seconds of it, that book hasn't changed, and the program itself hasn't changed. So therefore, the fellowship hasn't. So it's like, no matter where you go, you're going to find the same, maybe not the same people, but the same purpose and the same common goal, regardless of if you're in a group of 1,000 people and a huge meeting at Dallas or something, or if you're in a little bitty town in Luling, Texas, with like 8 or 9 people that are the same people that are there every Tuesday and Thursday. Like, it's still the same program. And so, yeah, it was just like, I would always hear people share in other meetings that were just like, you always find yourself in their stories. And I think that's one of the most rewarding parts about AA, is because whenever you feel like you're alone and that nobody else could have any idea what you're going through, somebody will stand up there and say, I was in a car wreck once and I hurt somebody. And you're just like, okay, like, wow. Like, that's somebody I can talk to. Or somebody who says, yeah, I lost my wife in a car accident. And you're just like, okay. Or somebody will talk about their childhood. Like, yeah, I didn't grow up with a dad. And you're looking at these people, and they could be a normal blue collar kind of person, or it could be an attorney. I mean, we all have these things that happen to us in our life, and you start to realize that you can't ever judge a book by its cover, and that everybody has their own life experiences and their upbringings, and everything fuels you to the person that you are today. And that's what, if anything, which that program taught me a lot, it's really taught me about acceptance and understanding people and not ever judging them, and just being open.
And so it sounds like sharing is a big part of the program. So how did it feel to, you're talking about people sharing their experiences. How did it feel for you to share your experience when you started doing that?
The first time I explained why I was sober was really, really hard, because I felt like I was just bearing my soul. Like, here I am in a group full of strangers, and I'm about to tell you the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And it, at that time, I felt like that's all that defined me, was that I had done this thing, that I had, taken 2 lives, that this was my life for here on out, was I'm that guy. Like, and, Ron really encouraged me and was like, if you ever want to receive anything out of this program, you have to give it in order to receive, And he showed me the page in the book where it says it, and I was like, okay, you're not just saying this, like, this is part of it. Okay. And so, yeah, I did it. In a short little way, I just explained that, I had made a horrible mistake, and that this was the result of it, and this is why I quit drinking, and why I don't want to drink, and why I'm in the program, and why I'm going to do everything I can one day at a time to make sure I never drink again. And that's why. And I couldn't believe it that after the meeting, everybody in that meeting came up to me and just told me thank you. And I was like, for what? Like, well, why would you be thankful that you had to hear me tell you that? And
And
all the
how did getting thanks for being that vulnerable and sharing that about yourself, how did that make you feel?
my first thought was it wasn't real. It wasn't realistic. I was like, well, they're just trying to be nice. Like, and then as time goes by and you hear things from other people, like whenever they share their story, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that happened to them. And then you start thinking about the things in your own life, and you're like, wow, I've been pretty close to that, or I've been through that. And it's just like you find that common ground and you're able to come together through it. And I mean, it's weird to think that it gives you strength. Like, how is that possible? But there is something that comes from that. Like when somebody shares their life, hardships, the things that have made them become the person who they are. It's like building a wall. It's just another brick to solidify that foundation. And for me, it was whenever I started sharing more about what I went through, as far as losing Valerie, and what let them, because I couldn't handle it, and that's what really fueled my drinking, and then to the point of where I had my wreck, and that knowing that I had done something so bad that I didn't know if I could come back from it, and there was strength in their stories, that I wasn't alone, that I'm not the only person that's made mistakes, and that it helped me really understand that what I did was a mistake. Like, it was an accident. And because even though I knew in my heart it was an accident, it was just like, how can you be forgiven for that? Like, how can you ever move past it? And AA really helped me with that. It was more of a, like, not, it wasn't just about getting sober for me. It was, because honestly, I feel like without AA, I would still be sober. But I know AA has made me grow as a person. It's made me a stronger person. It's made me more open to other people about acceptance, and being there as a friend and as a family member, and knowing that I can be open and available instead of trying to push everybody away. And that all the things I thought about as a child growing up that I wanted to be as a man, that AA kind of helped push that out of me, and let it stay in the surface where it belongs, and be in the front of my mind instead of in the back. And it was definitely a way to help me grow up and become what I believe is supposed to be a man.
Outstanding. Well, I want to move forward to when you were sentenced, and ultimately you were sentenced to 10 years on 2 counts of intoxication manslaughter, right?
Correct.
And so tell me about that sentence being entered.
Well, it was a blessing. I mean, going into that weekend, my only offer had been 20 years aggravated stacked on top of 20 years aggravated. And that was pretty much what I felt like I was going to get. I felt like that's what I deserved. I had kind of went that whole time out on bond and on house arrest, knowing that this was my chance to clean up my side of the street, make amends, spend time with family and friends, and kind of get ready to go away for a while. And I had become at peace with it. I knew that to this day, I feel like that was the least I could do, you know, to repay them. And I don't know why, but it ended up working out that they allowed me to sign for a 10-year sentence, non-aggravated, and ran together. So I only had to sign for 10 years, and I didn't have to go through a trial. I did have to make a public apology in the courtroom, and I'm so glad they wanted me to do that. It was really hard, but I knew I had to. Like, it's like, I mean, I didn't want to live the rest of my life feeling like maybe there was any ounce that they thought maybe I wanted something like that to happen, which I never expected them to think that, but they had every right to think whatever they wanted to think. And I just was glad I got the chance to tell them how sorry and I was and to take responsibility for it. And so I was able to do that. And, just some sort of closure. It really wasn't about me. I was just hoping it would be something to help them, because at that point in my life, I had tried so hard to push away any selfish thoughts. Like, it was, what can I do for everybody else? Like, I knew I was going away. Like, this isn't time for me to be selfish. This is time for me to make sure, is my mom okay? Is my dad okay? Is my grandma okay? Is Evelyn and Henry going to be okay? Are my sisters going to be okay? My friends, the ones that really stuck there through me, through everything. I was like, I just need to make sure my side of the road is clean, and I'm going to go do my time. And then I only ended up with a 10-year sentence, and it was just like, okay, I'm getting a second chance. Like, I mean, if I did every day, it's still only 10 years. Like, what a blessing. Like, wow. Like, I thought I was going to do a minimum of 20. And now it's like, I'm getting a second chance. And I didn't feel like I deserved it, honestly. To this day, I feel like, how do you repay what happened? Like, there's no way to ever do that. But I signed for my time and went to Waller County again and started that part of my journey.
And so before you are taken to Waller County, did Phil Baker talk to you or have a chance to let you see anything before you were taken back to county?
Yes, I had been already handcuffed and was sitting in kind of like a holding room, maybe a conference room, right next to the courtroom. And I remember him poking his head in and asking the officers that were in there watching me if if he could borrow me for a second. And they agreed. I stood up, and I was still just really I wouldn't even know how to explain my emotions at that time. It was just like, I wanted to feel some kind of closure, but yet I didn't. I wanted to feel so many emotions, but I couldn't. It was just like I was almost numb. And then I stood up and I walked over to the doorway, and he put his arm around me and was just like, I want you to look in that courtroom. And I did. And it was, the whole time my family was on one side and their family was on another side. And when I looked out in there, they were together and they were hugging and crying. And it was just like, how is that possible? Like, how can an understanding or love like that be possible at a time like this, And it's just like, it was probably, for me, one of the most beautiful things I'll ever see in my life.
Well, you get to county, and I assume, did they then put you on chain and get you to a transfer facility?
They actually, I stayed there for 45 days. And then, yes, I finally got taken over to Huntsville and got dropped off at the holiday unit to what's an intake facility, where they do a lot of your paperwork, your processing. They do blood work. It's like every day for a couple of weeks, you're having to go do some kind of test or interview or, get your ID card, all kinds of things, it seems like. And then once all that's done, you kind of just sit there and then wait to find out where you're going next. And then, so I was there for like 35 days.
And so how was Holiday different from county?
The Waller County was very small, and the little dorm or tanks I was in was only like 12 person. They were usually full. It just seemed like it was chaotic a lot of the times. And then I get to Holiday, and it seemed like there was like a lot more structure. Like everybody had that been here, done that mentality. Like, and I'm walking in like, I don't know anything. I don't know what to do. But the dorms were a lot bigger, more open. It was just like every day, just kind of watching the next person, like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, oh, okay, we're going to go eat now. Oh, okay. And, always having to ask questions, and felt like I was always bothering people like, hey, this little lay-in that I have says I'm supposed to go to the admin office. Where is that? And they're, rolling their eyes at me like, oh, you don't know about that? Okay, well, I was very green to prison, kind of just stayed to myself, especially at the holiday unit. Didn't really talk to anybody unless spoken to. And it was an intimidating thing, too. It was just like, I feel like I'm so out of place. And how am I going to relate to some of these guys,
So where did they transfer you to from Holiday?
I went to Pam Lynchner State Jail in Humble, and that was like walking into a completely different place. It was not like Holiday. There was zero structure. Wild, chaotic. Oftentimes just like you couldn't believe what you were seeing. It was different. I was like, oh, okay, this is what prison's going to be like. This is going to be a long ride. But just like anything else, you get used to it. You come to understand what to expect, and once you know what to expect, even the craziest things that do happen are almost normal.
And so What would you say to somebody who's never been to prison that's going? I mean, how is there anything you can say that would help prepare somebody for the experience?
The best thing I would say is it's not as bad as you think, that it's okay to be yourself. Do not try to emulate or conform to what you see around you. That you being just a normal you is more than sufficient to get through it. You don't have to let the things that you see happening around you define you. The pressure of being there is not what you think it's going to be. There's going to be hard times, and I hate to say it, but there's going to be times where it's almost easy. But the biggest thing is don't change who you are thinking that you have to conform to anything that's prison, because you don't.
So, when did you finally end up at the Ellis unit?
Well, after about 16 months at Pam Lichner, while I was there, I wrote to the warden about getting my trustee status, and told him about my welding and all of that, and that I had taken a couple classes. I took a computer-aided drafting course while I was there, and stayed out of the way, stayed out of trouble, and he granted me my S2, which is my trustee line class. And once I finished my CAD program, I got shipped to the PAC 2 unit, which is the OL Luther unit in Navasota, and was on the trustee camp there for about 3.5 years. So I did that before ever going to Ellis.
How was it being on the trustee camp?
Night and day difference. You aren't locked away. We didn't have a big fence around us. It was like you're just sitting in these dorms out in the country. You knew what was expected. We all had to work, but I mean, I got to play softball on the weekends. I got to come and go out in and out of the dorms as I wanted, within certain times, of course. I mean, it was just like, it was a big culture shock after, being gone for 1.5 years, being in a pretty wild place, to now all of a sudden you're at a place that's very relaxed. They have this custody level, knowing that could help them go home. And, so just complete 180 of what I expected, but in a good way, very good way.
And so what did you do work-wise in Navasota?
I had a few jobs. I worked at the dog kennel, which was really fun, getting to take care of the horses and take care of all of our dogs, and getting to put on the suit and fighting the dogs and trying to run away from them, and going on these 2-mile hikes in and out of the woods by yourself. And Navasota is a beautiful place. That unit's actually right on the Brazos River. So, I mean, literally crawling down into the Brazos and crawling out the other side, and you're just it felt like freedom. I also started working at the water plants there, the actual water wells that we had, the water treatment plant, and the wastewater plant we had. And that was a job I had for the longest time there, and ended up getting my Class D TCQ license. And I mean, I really liked that job. I actually really enjoyed learning all about it, and how our water works, from the time it gets pumped out of the ground to the time it gets used, and how it goes back into the ground. So the whole cycle of it is pretty fascinating. So that was a really good job. I really liked it.
So you get to the Ellis unit, and you end up being a part of a work squad, right?
Right.
And so, what happened on the work squad? I mean, what would you all do?
I worked. It was called HROM, which is a Huntsville Regional Outside Maintenance. We had different little crews. I ended up working with the generator and electronics department, which I really didn't know much about. I knew the generator aspect from welding machines, but obviously these weren't welding machines, so it was kind of different for me. But a buddy of mine that I had made at that unit, he was kind of like the guru for all that. Like, he was definitely the guy running it, and I just ended up getting to be his helper and to learn. So that was a really interesting job. It was a huge culture shock being told the first time, like, well, grab the tools and let's mark them all out, because, you have to take inventory of everything in prison. And just grabbing the stuff and walking out of the gate and putting the tools into the truck, and then being told to get in the truck. And I'm just like, okay, why? Because we got to drive over to this unit. And I'm like, in the truck? Like, not handcuffed? Nope, not handcuffed. Just get in. Come on, we're burning daylight. Like, okay. And literally, you're driving out into the world in your TDC white clothes and in the TDC truck, and knowing you're about to go to another unit to work and eventually coming back. Like, it was almost like an escape every day. So that sounded bad using the word escape. it felt like freedom.
Yeah, it was similar to crossing the Brazos. Yeah,
very much so. Just seeing new things, and like, oh wow, when did they make that car? And well, that's a Chevy now. Oh, okay. It was a good time. I felt like I was always learning. It kept me busy. That was one thing that really helped me as far as being gone, was that I always had a job. And if they told me I could work 16 hours overnight, I would do it. Like, if they called me out at 2 a.m. to go fix a water line, I was getting up and getting ready. Like, that was kind of what I felt helped me do my time, was to either study and learn and go to school, or to work. So.
And what did you learn was the best way for you to get yourself in a position to be considered for early release?
I always tried to look at what classes were available. Because TDC does have a lot of things that are available as far as classes, whether it's through Wyndham or Lee College, or they really have a lot to offer. I mean, there's sometimes where I wish they had offered more, but I also had to realize I'm like, I shouldn't expect them to offer me the world, But what they did offer was a lot of opportunities. So I took a lot of classes, trades, computer-aided drafting. I took a cognitive intervention class. I took a changes program. I took a Bridges to Life class. I took a Overcomers class. I went to AA meetings the whole time I was there. I went to different church groups. I got baptized while I was there. I mean, I always just stayed busy, and every opportunity I got, I took it. At Navasota, I got my associate's degree for business management, and the reason I got moved to Ellis unit was to get my HVAC degree, and I got that as well. And I even got an associate's degree in biblical studies through correspondence through a Bible college that Miss Evelyn helped me find. It was just like it felt like that's what I was supposed to be doing there. Like I wasn't here to hang out and play basketball all day. Like it was get ready to get out. That was my mentality from day one, was like, okay, well, will this make me better for when I get out? Like, I'm not going to be here the rest of my life. Like, even in 10 years, I'm going to be out. So let's do something. What's next? And that was just my mentality the whole time, was just, how can I be a better person?
I have heard so many people talk about changes, cognitive intervention, Voyager, and other courses that they took, and talk about how those classes impacted their thinking and mentality. What was your experience?
Cognitive, because of the unit I was at, they put so many people that were in there that didn't want to be in there. It was like forced. You could get disciplinary cases for not going to school. So if you all of a sudden get told you got to be in this class and you're an inmate that has no desire to go to it, doesn't want it, you're getting out in 3 or 4 months or something, like, so you go into the classroom and you act up, purposefully. And so with that class, it was a little harder because so many people didn't want to be there. So you're constantly struggling just to even hear the teacher, let alone her try to tell you things. But I took everything out of it I could. I really liked it. I took that when I first came into the system. So it really helped me kind of learn more about myself. The changes class, I actually got put into it. The cognitive I had signed up for. So when they put me in changes, I was like, oh my gosh, that could be a good sign. Because it happened to be right at the time I was up for parole. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a sign. Like, this is what normally happens for people. They make parole, get put in changes, or they get put in changes and then make parole. And I'm like, I've seen this a bunch of times. And, that's not how it worked out for me. But I still, the whole time, because of that class, most people, they're taking it because of parole. So they are listening. They are doing what they need to do. At least they might not care about it, but at least they're knowing that, hey, I really need to pay attention and not get in trouble while I'm in here. So that class was easier to take a lot out of. And I had a pretty cool teacher there that was just, she didn't take any BS from anybody. If guys acted up, she just got them out of the class, So,
wow.
So yeah, that was good. I took everything I could out of it. To me, sometimes it felt like it didn't. I could relate, but I felt like it wasn't specifically for me. I only say that because I had that time out on bond that I had really changed a lot, and I didn't feel like I related to a lot of these guys who came into the system with no change. Like a guy commits robbery and goes to prison, and he never once thought he did anything wrong. Like, he just did what he had to do. Well, those are the guys that don't take those classes seriously, that can't relate. And so once they do take those classes and they're like, oh, wow, they start learning these things, and they're like, I see where I was wrong, and oh, wow, I'm like that. Or for me, it was kind of like I had that changes processed into me while out in the world. And so for me, a lot of those classes, it was just like reinstilling things like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I need to keep that up. Or, oh no, I need to do better at that. Or, so not trying to sound better than anybody, but it was kind of like I had already begun making some of those changes in myself.
Who did you communicate with while you were in prison on the outside?
I was really fortunate that I had a lot of family and friends that stayed close with me. As far as Evelyn and Henry, I was always in communication with them. My mom, my dad, my grandma. Uh, then, I had my aunt, a lot of friends. Well, friends kind of come and go, but I did have several friends that were just there throughout all of it. My buddy Sam, my friends Ryan and Virginia. Uh, I had my sisters, as I call them, Evelyn's kids. So I really had a big support system. I was very fortunate.
And did you find that helped a lot?
Yeah, it was really nice because, being a trustee and being able to go to the day room whenever I wanted, and, if I just was missing my mom, I could just go out there and call her, and if I received a letter from Evelyn that said, "Hey, call me, I need to talk to you about something," I could walk out there and do it. It wasn't like, you would get a letter from somebody who said they were going through all this bad stuff, and it would just hurt you so bad knowing you couldn't do anything about it. Or, or if you get a letter from somebody talking about somebody else, like those were difficult letters. Like, well, did you hear so and so what happened? And you're just like, well, what can I do about it? I can't even reach out to them. So having people to communicate with is a big deal. I mean, mail call Monday through Friday was like what everybody looks forward to. It's like, the way I explain it to a few people since I've been out is like, okay, imagine you have your cell phone, all right, and they tell you you're going to get to check that cell phone one time a day. And it's not whenever you want to, it's whenever somebody else tells you you can. And then whenever you do get to check it, you may or may not have anybody sending you a text or not, or having a missed call. And you may or may not be able to return that text or that call. That's what it feels like. So some days it's like, wow, I got a few texts and a few pictures and a few phone calls. And then some days it's like, I waited all day and nobody said anything. And I was a fortunate one, and I'm not complaining about those bad days. But I knew guys in there that went years without letters or phone calls. And I don't know how they did it. I mean, I knew guys who did less time than me that never once heard from anybody. They had wives and daughters and sons and brothers and sisters. And I mean, here I am doing twice and three times more time as them, and I get a phone call every day. It's up to me. I have to call them. So if I don't call anybody that day, whose fault is it? Yeah, they might not answer, and I get that. That's just like out here. If I call you and you don't answer, it's probably because you're busy. Like, it's not negative. It's just how the world works.
Yeah. So when did you first become eligible for parole?
2014, in July. I was still at Pam Lynchner. I remember going in there and having an interview with this man, and it was the longest parole interview I would ever have. It lasted well over an hour. I was stuck in count time, which for people that don't know, that means during count time there's no movement. So if me and you were at the chow hall eating and they call count, well, we're probably stuck in the chow hall for at least an hour. Or if we're in class, or like I was in an interview, I'm not going back to the dorm until count is cleared. So being that I got stuck in count, we had more time. And Pam Lynchner is a state jail, so it's not all TDCJ offenders. It's also state jail offenders. So state jail doesn't have parole. They have 2 years maximum sentences. So the day you sign for your time to be a state jail offender, your release date. TDC doesn't work that way, obviously. We have the parole system. So he didn't have as many people to see that day. I was his only interview. And I mean, I walked away knowing I wasn't making parole. I He made that clear without using those words. He was very straightforward about his questions, cut and dry. Answer my questions. Let's get it over with. Okay. And, I did this every year. I always asked the person interviewing me, knowing that they had no say so in my parole decision, if they thought I had a good chance. And the first time was, I don't know if him with a very straight face, he like refused to answer me basically. And I was just like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm probably not going home. That's fine. And it was like that pretty much every year. All the years after that, though, it was kind of, the interviews were short. They might take 5 minutes. You leave feeling like, did they really have to call me in here to tell me anything? It's really, they call you in there after that first initial interview just to make sure your parole address hasn't changed and that your contact information is the same.
And so when was the first time, or did you ever have hope that maybe you would be paroled?
The time they put me in changes, I was like, oh my gosh, like I've got close to half of my time done. That seems, because I was watching guys only do, even with my charge, like 2 years on a 10. But I was also watching guys with my charge do about 9 on a 10. So it was like, where do you fit in the middle? I don't find that it was hard trying to compare yourself to anybody else because it seemed like nothing was ever the same. So I was like, well, maybe I might be the fortunate one. Maybe all the things I've done in here and that I've stayed out of trouble and that I've done right, maybe this will be it. And they're putting me in changes, so why not? And, they gave me what's called a serval, which basically means I'm not going to be eligible for parole. I get denied, and that was my last chance of actually making parole, like making a program and going to your short way, which basically means release mandatory supervision, which from there on out, it was either you're going home or you're not. You don't have to go to classes. You've already done too much time on your sentence. And so once that time and I got denied, my mentality switched as far as, okay, I'm going to be here a while. Like, I don't need to stress over parole anymore. All it's doing is hurting me. It's hurting my family. They're getting their hopes up. And that doesn't need to be the case. And but obviously, eventually your family gets, they get tired of, the disappointment, and they think, well, what else can we do? And that's where you came into my life.
So we get to the first few months of this year, and by that time, how much time had you served?
So around what month? I can be pretty accurate with it.
February.
I was a little over 6.5 years had been served. And I had already I went in for my parole interview, which means I walked in and signed a piece of paper and walked out. And it was, I felt confident. I was like, I know I've done everything. Like, I feel like I haven't left any stones unturned. All I can do is just wait and see. I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't nervous. I got to the point those last few years where it was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and think I'm doing 10 years until they prove otherwise to me. And so even with your help, I knew I was confident. Like, I knew we had done everything we could do, but I also knew at the end of the day that sometimes that doesn't matter. And that, that the parole board has their reasons for the decisions they make, and I have no say-so in that, and you don't. So you kind of have to learn to let go of all that and not let your emotions get attached to what, a group of people decide for your life. It's hard to do it, but after being denied 6 times, you kind of have to learn to accept it. And that's what I did. I accepted completely that it never was my decision to be made. It never would be. And that if I did everything I was supposed to do, why am I stressing over it? And I knew I had done everything I needed. So they're either going to let me go or they're not. And that was my mentality going into this last parole.
So do you remember where you were when you got the news that you were being paroled?
Wow. I remember receiving a JPay from a guy named Ed telling me how the interview went. And it was actually the same day that you had that interview. I was shocked at how quickly I was able to get that JPay. But you didn't say I had made it. You just told me how well you thought it went, and that one of the members of the parole board, told you to tell me to pat myself on the back, or, maybe I'm not saying it the right way or what he said verbatim, but it was basically that I had done a good job, and I was just like, that's good. How do I process that? Like, how do I take that? And I was just like, wow. Well, the next day I'd go to work, and I asked my boss, at the time I was working at the ag shop at the LS unit, and I was like, hey, I might have my parole answer. Is there any way you can find out? And sure enough, he pulled it up on the computer, and there it was. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, it didn't seem real. Like, it, as happy as I wanted to be, like, I remember just taking a deep breath. Just like, I thought more about my family than I did me. It was just like, oh God, they don't have to worry anymore, and then, as the day went on, it was just like, I'm going home. Like, I'm really going home. And then it was kind of like, you have moments of like, well, where is home? What is home? Like, what is that going to be like now? What am I going to do? And, you second guess yourself. Everybody tries to tell you like, oh man, you're going to be okay. Like, you've just done a bunch of time. You're like, have I? Like, that's not reassuring me. Like, I feel like I haven't done that much, but I have, and I haven't. And it's like, you want to it got to the point after a few days of getting to talk with Evelyn and talking to my dad, making phone calls and writing letters and letting the people I wanted to know, just like, it just slowly, for me, it slowly sank in. And then, you see a release date and you're like, oh, wow, all these steps that make it more real, going to see reentry, and knowing that, hearing somebody from TDC tell you are going to be released, like, not just seeing it on a computer screen, but, it's like, there's all these little things that happen that just, okay, it's a little more real. Okay, it's a little more real. And then, I was going through all this while COVID was really starting to hit the prison systems. And so all of a sudden, they're not transferring us anywhere unless it's medical emergencies, and all of the things that normally happen in prison as far as being released stopped happening. And I was just like, well, my life hasn't been easy. Why would I expect this to be easy? It's like, my date got pushed back several times. Then all of a sudden they tell me that I'm going to get released from the Ellis unit and that I'm going to be the first person to be released from there since the 70s. And I'm just like, how does this work? And then they tell me I'm going to be the first person to ever be released from a trustee camp. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to be released from here? And the warden actually told me, he was like, yep, you're going to go put those clothes on. You're going to walk out that door. And I'm like, visitation? Like the same door my family's been walking through to come see me all these years? That's where I'm going to walk out of? And he's like, yep, you're going to get in that car and you're going to leave. And I'm just like, okay. Like every time you get transferred in TDC, there's all these things you have to go through. You have to have your property searched. You have to get your mattress and your sheets taken away. You've got to wait up all night to finally get on a chain bus. You got to be shackled. You got to get shackled next to somebody. You've got to make all the pit stops at different units, riding in the Bluebird, the TDC buses and all the paperwork. And I literally packed my stuff the night before I was released, went to bed like any other normal night, got up, drank coffee, hung out with some of my buddies, and waited for the officer to tell me to go to visitation and leave. And that's literally what I did. I picked up my bag of stuff I wanted to take home with me and walked into visitation, did my paperwork, went in the bathroom and changed, and walked out. Got in the car and left.
And who was there to pick you up?
Evelyn and Natalia, and then my dad was also there.
And so when you have changed clothes and you see them, tell me about what it felt to be walking out of the Ellis unit.
Honestly, one of the first thoughts I had, this is ridiculous, but Natalia had brought like a t-shirt and I guess sweatpants are like this now, or joggers or what they call it, is now like a fashionable thing. And so she brought me these like gray sweatpants and I'm just like, is that what people wear now? And I put them on and I was like, you know what? These are really comfortable. Okay. I think there's something to this. And, I'm just like, this is nice. I was wearing normal underwear. I wasn't forced to wear boxers. My clothes smelled good. You just have all these things that you're just like, wow, that's different. I like it. I remember what this was like, and it just felt really good. You're just walking out and I'm holding a TDC red chain bag in free world clothes and I'm walking out to Miss Evelyn who's bawling her eyes out already. Just like, wow, it finally happened. And that first day, it still didn't feel real. Like I had this weird subconscious feeling of like, well, at any moment they could call and make me go back. I know, it was just like, I made my 7th parole, so it was just like it's not like I don't have any faith in the system. It's just like you have to be ready for disappointment at all times. And so when you finally get given a gift again, to have some kind of closure to say that, okay, I did this, like it's done, like this part's done. Okay. You just almost feel like it could be taken back at any moment.
Yeah.
But I was just happy. Quiet. Didn't really say a whole lot. I tried to be as open as I could for my family and, took a lot of phone calls and got handed a cell phone that I had no idea how to work. And it was amazing.
So what was it like to physically be in the presence, to be with your family and the people you love?
It almost felt like I was breaking a rule. Like that drive home, like I said, it was just like, am I supposed to do, like, I can hug you, right? Like, I'm not going to get in trouble. Like, me and Natalia sat in the back seat and Evelyn drove us. And it was just like, this is real. Like, how does this feel like it was yesterday? Like, that I was doing this before? Like, why does it feel like at the snap of a finger 7 years go by, And it was just like a shock. And I'm looking at Natalia, and when I left, she was in high school, and now she's in her second year of teaching after graduating college. And, how is Miranda going about to be getting her PhD when she had barely was in her freshman year of college? Or, like, you're just like, and even things like that were sad, like, I can't call my grandma, like, she's been gone, and I can't call my mom because she's been in a nursing home. And it's ups and downs because you realize those things that have happened over the years come and go to you, but overall, it's just a sense of just being able to breathe fully again. Like, the sun shines brighter, the wind feels better at your back. Everything is just, you see such positivity in everything.
How long have you been free as we sit here today?
Almost 5 months.
And what have you experienced being free that you didn't expect to experience while you were inside waiting to get out?
I always heard from guys that, you would get out and forget about this place and that it would just go away. And I've realized that sometimes you do have those moments where I sit here and feel like I've been out working for a long time, or I've been at the lake house for a while, or that I wasn't gone that long, that I've already had memories that have left me from prison, or, and so you kind of feel like, is that supposed to be okay? Like, is that normal to feel like I wasn't gone as long as I was, when going through it, it felt like forever, and I applied for 3 jobs and got hired at all 3 when I got out. Like, okay, I'm glad that's not, I wish more guys would know that. And, there's just all these things that people think you're not going to be able to do. Like, oh, it'll be hard for you to get a car or a truck because I got financed for a car on my own already. Like,
wow.
You just do it. There's so many things that I don't know if it's prison lingo or the rumor mills, that it's so easy to get down on ourselves in there and think that we don't have a second chance. But I think that's the main thing for me. It's like, where it's like, oh yeah, you won't be able to do something because you went to prison. And it's just like, who told you that? Like, why is that a thing for us to even acknowledge? Like, it's ridiculous. And so I've been glad that that's been one of the things I've experienced. Is like, all the times I'll accomplish something, I'll just be like, yep, they were wrong. I knew it. Like, I knew me and other guys like me that have been through this. I know we can do this. Like, this isn't, guys ask me all the time, like, well, how do you not drink? And I'm like, how do you drink? Like, why is that even a question? Or, well, how hard is it being on parole? And I'm like, well, how hard is it for you not being on parole? Like, we're both out here living our lives trying to be good people, right? Like, you're trying to take care of your family. I mean, I don't have a family to take care of, but in a sense, I'm doing the same thing, There's no difference between being on parole and not being on parole, or There doesn't have to be a difference for me going to prison and this next person not going to prison. At the end of the day, we're just human beings trying to do the best we can, and that fighting against that judgment and mentality of that just because you've gone through the system that you're supposed to be doomed or something. That's just ridiculous to me.
So, what are your plans for the future now? What do you see?
Wow. Well, I don't get to be completely normal yet because I am on parole. I get off June 2023. And once that happens, more things are available. I feel like I can go within Texas. I can live anywhere in Texas. That's fine. So, my biggest thing is just kind of getting financially stable, saving some money up. I feel like I've been able to, the first few months, I've noticed there was just a lot of things I didn't have anymore. I got rid of so much stuff, clothing, furniture. Some of the clothing I found was no longer usable. There's just things like that. And I wanted to get it. I didn't have a chest of drawers. So there's like all these things you find that, are, wow, like I kind of need some things right now. So for me, I feel like I've caught up on all that. I have clothes, I have work clothes, I have all the tools I need for work. I have steady transportation. I have all my necessities now. And so now it's kind of like I'm gearing towards what does the future hold? What do I see my life being like? And for me, I turned 32 in a week, less than a week now. And so it's like, okay, well, I feel like I'm at a good point in my life where I can start thinking about my future and, what does that hold? What does that look like? And for me, it's always been, I just would love to have a family and to hopefully meet somebody that I feel like I can, be my counterpart in life and to share the rest of my life with and hopefully have a family. And so to me, it's just getting ready for that and not rushing the other part of it. I just want to be available. That's my biggest part in life right now, is being available to when that day comes and that person is in my life and I can just feel like, well, am I ready? And I'll just be like, yep. And not have to be like, oh man, I had all this time and I didn't do anything. Like, you never started saving up for a house yet, or things like that. Just that's kind of what my goals are, is to just really work hard while I'm still single and without kids and not being married, and put as much money away as humanly possible, and just to make myself available, and whenever the right person comes along, and go from there.
Well, you said something that I made a note about. You talked about in the context of what goes on in prison and not letting what happens define you.
Right.
And so with all that has happened in your life as we sit here today, kind of what have you come to see and say about yourself? I mean, what does Taylor stand for, and who is Taylor?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I stand for today is just trying to be a selfless person, and to be somebody in my family and friends' lives that they can not necessarily always look up to, which I would hope they would, but to know that they can count on me, that I'm going to be there, just to make myself available to the people I love, because I spend a lot of time pushing people away, letting things in life affect me negatively. And so I want to leave a really good legacy for those that know me, that to be kind of like a good shoulder to lean on, regardless of what I've been through. I just want to be able to one day just somebody look me in the eye and shake my hand and tell me that they were so glad that they got to know me. Or, I have this image of one day a box being lowered into the ground and, just hearts being filled with like, you know what, that was a good guy. He always did me right. Or, hopefully one day a kid going off to college thinking about, I have a really good dad. Or maybe my wife going to bed at night thinking, wow, I really got a good husband. Like, I'm so blessed. That's what I think life is about now. And that's what I want to leave behind, is that it didn't matter what all I had to go through to get to where I'm at, but that I still got there, and that I didn't let the hard times in life change me negatively, and that, for whatever reason, I got given a second chance, and that I never let go of it, that, people will think about me one day and smile.
Well, I know that right now I can't shake your hand, but I will tell you how incredibly glad I am to know you. And I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me. You are just an absolutely amazing young man. And it is just remarkable how you have dealt with everything that you have experienced. And I want you to know that you have made a tremendous impact and contribution to my life.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. I know I might not be able to even get to have this interview if it would have been for your help. So I can't tell you how much I am grateful for you being in my life as well.
Well, good. Let's definitely stay in touch. And I absolutely know that you are going to realize all the hopes that you have for your life, and that you just have a great life ahead of you. And so thanks so much for spending the time talking to me.
You're welcome. And thank
Great.
you.